Our guest this part of the program is Michael Hackard. He is the author of Alzheimer's, Widowed Stepmothers, and Estate Crimes. Also, his book from a year ago, and this is a brand new book, by the way, it just came out in early March 1st, I believe, The Wolf at the Door, Undue Influence and Elder Financial Abuse. And we're going to talk with Michael right now. He's based in Sacramento, California. Would you also be offended that somebody at 55 is considered an old, crazy lady?
Well, you know, at my age, I'm 69, Mark, so 55, that sounds like a fountain of youth. Yeah,
right?
That's right. So I always felt, but I do remember when I was 55, I thought when they were calling 55-year-olds elderly, I thought, I sure don't feel elderly. And actually, at my age now, I don't feel elderly.
No, and I've seen a picture. You don't look it.
No, thanks.
You're welcome. But I remember being 18 and not trusting people over 30, right?
Exactly.
So we're really talking about, you know, to me, ageism. But as we grow older, you're 69. The fact is that people in our generation, the baby boomer generation, are growing up, and we wake up and we think, I'm Mark, I'm Mike, I'm Daryl. Okay, good start for the day. Because you don't want to wake up with Alzheimer's or some kind of dementia. It's scarier than hell.
It is scary. It is scary. And it's scary because of the numbers. And of course, the numbers are increasing because there's depending on how you count, up to 75 million baby boomers, and the risk factor for Alzheimer's goes up by decade, basically. But it's a scary thing.
At 75 million people, that's almost a third of the population.
Yeah, we're really getting baby boomers are, we were the fountain of youth, or the youthful generation, looking back in the group that would never get old, and now we're getting old, and a good percentage of us still take care of our parents and actually take care of children. So we're in an interesting spot.
We are. It would seem to me that it's easier to take advantage, to con somebody who has some form of dementia, than somebody who has all their marbles.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the literature, the medical literature talks about vulnerability, because someone with dementia, the essence of it is short-term memory, but loss. But it also has to do with confusion and with sometimes with paranoia, and it's far easier to manipulate people who have those kinds of conditions than those that don't.
Have you had any personal experience with family members with Alzheimer's or dementia yourself?
Well, we had a personal experience that got me started in some ways into what I do today, and it was almost 30 years ago. But it was my mother's aunt, who was a fairly wealthy lady and had, for the most part, had planned to leave her estate to her nieces and to some charities, and got taken advantage of by a caregiver. And but for the fact she had dementia, the caregiver would have never been able to do what she did. So that was a personal experience.
I know that caregivers. There are bonded caregivers. There are agencies. I know that when my mom was ill and she needed somebody to care for her, it wasn't cheap. I think it was, and it's been 17 years, I think it was $25 an hour times 24 hours, 7 days a week.
Yeah, it is very expensive.
And the opportunity that caregivers can have to take money and to drain bank accounts, I guess, is just, the opportunity is really scary.
It's really scary, and of course, because we do so much litigation in it, I see it all the time, and it's whether the caregiver's taking $30,000 or $5 million, they're putting the senior or elder at substantial risk, and there's almost if a caregiver's doing it, there's just a cover up and in place, and normally you can see a bit of it going on just because the senior gets isolated and the caregiver has a big hand in that isolation.
Yeah, it happened in the case of B.B. King, matter of fact, with his death in Las Vegas. The caregiver was accused of taking money. And then, it gets even more personal in the case of Casey Kasem, which obviously what happened with him happened in the public venue, and then Carrie Kasem is a close personal friend, and she started an organization called Kasem Cares that you're probably aware of, Mike, that is an Overwatch society looking out for this kind of abuse.
Yeah, I am aware. I know that she is truly one of the leaders in the country who's doing marvelous work and trying to get this information out.
At the same time, if I become Daryl's caretaker or the executor, Daryl and I are brothers.
Yeah, look at the numbers. I think it's going to work the other way.
Well, that's true. But, okay, so Daryl is taking care of me.
You're the older dude here.
I know, but I'm smaller too. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, but if Daryl is my executor, okay.
Okay.
Does he have a right to take a salary because he's spending so much time taking care of me? And it may not, there may or may not be any money there, but is there some form of compensation due to somebody who's taking care of another person?
Yeah, normally yes, but by way of contract, because the problem is if there isn't a contract. I had this particular case, an elderly woman in her 90s, and her caregiver, she was supposed to be paid, I think, $2,000 a month, but her caregiver was putting $1,000 check in front of her every day and telling her she hadn't yet been paid for the month. And by the time that the caregiver was caught, I think she'd taken $100,000. So, yeah, it's better to have a contract because the caregivers can just take such advantage of an elder who's got dementia and simply doesn't know how much he or she is paying that caregiver.
The book that you've come out with is really a guide, so that if somebody has a parent or a spouse or a family member or even a friend, you give some guidelines to mitigate the chance of financial ruin and being taken advantage of.
Well, that's certainly, thank you. That is the effort that I made because it's just so tragic for people to watch an elder get taken advantage of, and they feel like they're a bystander that can't prevent it. And oftentimes it's very difficult to prevent, but at least we can identify some things that they can do and some signs of the abuse.
And at the same time, we should point out, in the case of my mother's caregivers, they were terrific. I mean, I wrote the checks, but it was we needed somebody. I'm certainly not qualified to take care of another person when they to help them shower or wash their hair. These are the kinds of things that you want the caregiver to do, and you don't want that isolation, because that's I think a clear sign that there may be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, caregivers are, sometimes they feel like angels. They're just terrific, and they provide comfort to the elder and comfort to the family. Um, it's like in anything. In fact, for the most part, on undue influence cases, or 50, I think it's something like 57% of the abusers are family members, and 15% of them are caregivers. So, but it's just when things go awry, they can go really awry.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And if you know, we hear these stories, and again, going back to 40s radio, which I do not remember from the first time, no matter what Daryl says. You've got a woman or a man who's elderly, considered elderly, has a lot of money, and wants to leave it to a stepdaughter or stepson. The stepdaughter wants to off the person early so they get all that money fast. I mean,
Yeah, a classic
it's a
40s movie. Yeah,
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 film noir. I guess
yeah.
would be
There you
right.
got it. That's
And
right.
I think the but it's happening today where they're draining the money because they need it, they want it, they feel they deserve it. They see that they're not going to get it. The will is to give it to Pookie the dog. Um,
Yeah, you're right. And there are various ways to drain it. Um, and just a recent one comes to mind, but I've seen it so many times. For those people that have cash in a safe, usually by the time, if we get involved in estate litigation, that is just something we cannot prove. And oftentimes it's anecdotal, and maybe a daughter or son says, "Yeah, well, Dad always kept $200,000 in cash, and not exaggerated, or 500,000 in cash, or whatever the figure is." But it's
in a mattress.
no, actually, the ones I have seen are in safes, uh, and but the safe is always drained by the time that the legitimate heirs seem to come in. I caution people about that.
Our guest is Michael Hackard. Uh, he does a podcast too. We'll find out more about that when we come back from our break. He's written a book called Alzheimer's, Widowed Stepmothers and Estate Crimes, and it's a guide to help you in case a loved one needs some help. All right, I'm Mark Alyn, along with the insane Daryl Wayne. Don't go away. More coming up, and don't try this at home. I am a professional. Late Night Health continues. I'm Mark Alyn, along with the insane Daryl Wayne. Our guest is Michael Hackard. He's a super attorney. That's a designation he's earned. And the book is called Alzheimer's, Widowed Stepmothers and Estate Crimes. Let's talk about a couple of things. So I have a feeling that my caregiver that I've hired and who's isolated my mom, or a stepbrother, even a brother, and I want to hire you or another attorney to go after them. How does that work? I mean, how do you make a decision, a determination if this is the case that has merit or not?
Mark, the first thing I would say, kind of go through a checklist for you and see if you could gather a good deal of information yourself. Now, a lot of times you can't, because if there's isolation, the caregiver won't let you even in the house or apartment. But you look for unpaid bills. Sometimes it's pretty extreme. Utilities are shut off. Look for checks and unfamiliar signatures. You can also look around. Oftentimes, items are gone from the house. So, and you just look for some of those markers. If you can't get to the markers, oftentimes people will hire an investigator, and that's just something we've gotten more involved in recently. And I've spoken before a group of California licensed investigators suggesting certain things. if you can get information there, then the next steps for a living relative are difficult because we have standing issues. In other words, who can bring a lawsuit? And people are presumed, the elder is presumed to have capacity. And so even, let's say, an aggrieved son has a difficult time bringing a lawsuit because of that presumption of capacity. There are kind of some ways we can get around that, but it's a tough thing.
And if somebody has $100,000 or $100 million, does it matter?
Well, it does matter in terms of the firepower that maybe you can bring to the party or to the litigation. And at 100,000 at stake, it's tough. I mean, just the amount of money that it takes to hire a lawyer, or oftentimes we do things on contingency fees, but it's tough to have a contingency case where the elder is alive and is being abused while living.
It's better if they're dead?
Well, in terms of the cases and what the law says with regard to standing, in terms of a legal case, it's stronger if they've passed away. And of course, I realize as I say this, that just sounds terrible. It sounds terrible. No, I know, and it sounds like, well, we made it up, but we didn't really make it up. I mean, it's the issue of standing, and my heart goes out to, and I do everything I can within my own power to make those challenges while someone is living, to make them effective. I can just say, though, from experience, long experience, it's a difficult task.
Wow. And you said contingency. Here in California, that's like 30%?
Well, anywhere from usually on a contingency for on behalf of, say, a conservator or someone who is impaired, it's of 1/3, but oftentimes a estate and trust litigation is up to 40%.
Gotcha. But it's still worth it because even if it's just a few $1 million, it's still a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, and I always sit down with our clients and I want to listen to their story and see what they're telling me. But when it comes to the financial aspects on a contingency case, I always say, we're both starting with zero, absolute zero.
Right. And do you are these civil or criminal or both?
Well, we don't get to do criminal because we're only civil lawyers. They're a mix, though, of civil law, where, say, in the civil courts where you can get a jury trial, and in the probate courts where you don't get a jury trial. So we like jury trials if we can get to them.
Of course. Hey, Michael, thank you very much. Look forward to talking to you again about this as the laws change, because they're always changing. You have an interesting case, let us know. Would love to talk to you again, and come down to LA and we'll get together. Michael Hackard, the author of Alzheimer's, Widowed Stepmothers and Estate Crimes. I'm Mark Alyn. I thank Daryl for everything he does for us. Thank you, sir. And I thank you very much for tuning in. Share us with your friends. Go to latenighthealth.com. I'm Mark Alyn. Have a good week. Have a great week. And as I say every week, have a healthy week. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.